At the class reunion, he arrived successful and accompanied by his stunning girlfriend. She remarked, "If you hadn't let go back then, you'd be Mrs. Fu Group by now." He sat across from me, holding his girlfriend close, his expression indifferent. That's all in the past. The crowd, never ones to shy away from drama, started to stir things up. Under his steady gaze, I silently covered the scars on my wrist, forcing a smile. Yes, we've been over for a long time. Chapter 1. I remember it was Naomi who ended things, wasn't it? Taking advantage of the moment his girlfriend went to the restroom, the classmates started gossiping. "Naomi, that's me." Nestor sat across the table, a faint smile on his lips, though his eyes were as cold as ice. This was our first meeting 6 years after the breakup. Everything felt abrupt and out of place. After all, I'd only come because the class monitor assured me Nestor wouldn't attend. But here we were, crossing paths unexpectedly. Today, Nestor was a man of achievements, an exceptional young entrepreneur in the city, a highly educated returnee from abroad, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He exuded charm and confidence. Even the watch on his wrist was worth a fortune. Everyone treated him with respect and admiration. In stark contrast, I was nothing like I once was. "It's true, she was the one who broke up first," Nestor answered calmly, addressing the group's curiosity. Speculations swirled. Most assumed I had been materialistic, unwilling to endure hardship, gambled on the wrong man, and ultimately lost everything. "Naomi, didn't the guy you got with after that end up in jail? And didn't you take on his debts? You must be here at the reunion to beg for money, right?" Amid the sneers and jabs, Nestor's deep, penetrating gaze remained fixed on me, silent and unreadable. I forced a laugh, too embarrassed to respond. The door opened, and Nestor's girlfriend returned. Sensing the odd atmosphere, she smiled and asked, "What happened while I was gone?" Breaking his silence, Nestor took her hand gently, his tone warm. "Nothing. Just reminiscing." She gracefully sat down, her gaze landing on me with a faint smile revealing dimples. She said, "Nestor's told me about you. If you hadn't let go back then, you'd be Mrs. Fu Group now." Many in the room glanced at me with thinly veiled schadenfreude. Back in the day, the Bai family had been at its peak. Wherever I went, I was the center of attention, envied and admired. That jealousy hadn't faded with time. Instead, it had fermented, turning into the perfect fuel for their mockery years later. Nestor's voice cut through the tension, his tone crisp and commanding, leaving no room for argument. "That's all in the past." The room fell silent, the group understanding that he had no interest in continuing the topic. They quickly shifted to other conversations. His girlfriend raised her glass towards me. "Thank you for letting go. Make sure to attend our wedding." I silently covered the scars on my wrist and numbly replied, "Congratulations." Chapter 2. Why don't you explain things to him? Regina, my best friend, sounded indignant over the phone. The class reunion had ended early, and I stood wrapped in my coat, exhaling mist into the cold air. "He has a girlfriend now." There was a pause on the other end. "A girlfriend?" Regina's disbelief was palpable. "Yeah." Classmates were leaving in small groups, their shadows stretching under the streetlights. The snow on the ground reflected the golden glow, glittering like shards of broken glass. "It's such a shame. You worked so hard to meet him again." "Regina, no one waits for you forever. Some things, if left unsaid in the moment, only come across as pathetic later on." The icy wind stung my eyes, making them water. I blinked rapidly and said hoarsely, "I've given up." Even after all these years of clawing my way out of the mire, hoping to meet him again with some semblance of dignity, it was already too late. "All right," Regina sighed. "We'll talk when you get back." It was already below freezing just before the Lunar New Year, and taxis were hard to come by. My hands were frozen stiff as I checked my phone, still waiting in queue. The click of high heels on the pavement broke the silence behind me, accompanied by a soft, honeyed voice. "Nestor, the snow is so beautiful. It's cold out. Get in the car. I'll be there in a moment." Nestor's distinct voice replied. "Hurry back," the woman said. As she walked past me, she gave me a glance laced with subtle meaning. then headed toward a car nearby. She opened the door, the angle of her movement deliberately exposing the bracelet on her wrist, an ostentatious heirloom of the Fu family. That bracelet had once adorned my wrist. When we broke up, I'd asked someone to return it to Nestor. She wasn't just his girlfriend, she was his fiancée. The crowd had dispersed, leaving only the two of us. My ride still hadn't arrived. Nestor remained standing silently behind me. The two of us stayed there, unmoving, our shadows overlapping beneath the street lamp. My mind drifted back to that night 6 years ago. The night of our breakup. Nestor had gotten into a car accident on his way to meet me. His friend had called, his tone accusatory. Nestor's in the hospital. Is it life-threatening? Would you only come if it were? Please take good care of him, Naomi. He's been accepted into an overseas program. He's going to succeed one day. Why couldn't you wait a little longer? Do you need money that badly? After everything he's done for you, you owe him a lifetime of gratitude. How could you forget all of that? His friend's voice had nearly broken with rage, calling me ungrateful and selfish. Then, the phone had been snatched away, and the call was abruptly ended. In every sense, I had been the one to leave him behind. His hatred was understandable. How much do you owe? Nestor's cold voice jolted me back to the present. It's none of your business, I replied. The cold air stung my throat, already raw from the alcohol earlier. I coughed violently, the chill cutting through my lungs. I doubled over, clutching the street lamp for support, the alcohol in my stomach churning. Tears streamed from my eyes as I choked. Nestor stood by, watching impassively. A taxi pulled up in front of me, and the driver leaned out. Headed to the A residence? Yes. I steadied myself and reached for the car door, but a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back. Caught off guard, I stumbled into Nestor's chest. Why are you going there? He demanded. The A residence was a gated community for the wealthy, not easily accessible. I half-heartedly tried to push his hand away, but he tightened his grip around my wrist. His touch was searing against my cold skin, radiating heat all the way to my chest. I struggled, but his grip held firm. I looked up at his shadowed expression, his face unreadable. What are you trying to say? I asked. His dark eyes were calm but unfathomable. His lips pressed into a thin line. The wind whipped around us, tangling my hair. I smirked bitterly and voiced the thought I knew he was harboring. You think, like everyone else, that my money isn't clean, don't you? 50,000 a month, will that do? His cold voice interrupted me. What do you mean? I asked, stunned. The corner of his mouth lifted in a mocking smirk. Aren't you short on money? 50, 100,000. Is that not enough? My hand moved on its own, delivering a sharp slap across his face. The sound cracked through the still night air. A startled cry came from the distance as his fiancée rushed out of the car. Mind your own business, I said icily, climbing into the taxi. And keep your hands out of my life. I left him standing there as the taxi drove away. Chapter 3. You slapped him? Regina handed me a cup of hot water. Yeah, he tried to keep me as his mistress. I curled up on the sofa, clutching my stomach as waves of pain racked through me. Slowly, I sipped the water. Moments later, I bolted for the bathroom and threw up everything I had just swallowed. Regina patted my back. You know your stomach can't handle alcohol. Why did you drink? I took a few deep breaths, wiping the water from my lips. My throat burned like fire. After all these years, do you still think it was worth it? I raised my eyes to the mirror. My wet eyelashes clung together, and my damp black hair stuck to my forehead. My face was pale, almost ghostly. Regina's voice drifted faintly from behind me, like a distant echo. If you hadn't been so ruthless and broken up with him, he wouldn't be where he is today. The image of Nestor's fiancée flashed through my mind again. Compared to me, she was radiant and full of life. Once upon a time, I had been just like that. But after my fall from grace, I had lost that luster. By the time I clawed my way out of the abyss, everything had changed. After Regina finished her shift at the manor, the two of us held hands and walked back to the cramped apartment we called home. That was when I received a call from Nestor's friend, Naomi. If you're struggling, I can help you find a job. I didn't say a word, waiting for him to continue. They're getting married next month. Calliope is a good person, and her family's background is strong. I won't bother him anymore. I interrupted. Don't worry. There was a long silence before he explained, almost apologetically. We just want Nestor to have a better life. Okay, I replied. Every single one of our mutual friends had sided with Nestor back then. Not one had stood with me. After the call ended, Regina's eyes were red with anger. They don't understand anything. It doesn't matter, I murmured. Since I still had to stay in the city for a while, I found a job near the apartment. During the interview, the HR manager glanced at my medical record skeptically. You've had depression? That's in the past, I replied. I've recovered, and I have a doctor's certificate to prove it. Several companies had rejected me during background checks because of my history. This company was smaller, and I received the job offer that very evening. I thought the class reunion would mark the last intersection of my life and Nestor's. But 3 days later, Nestor unexpectedly appeared at my company as an executive, and my desk was moved to sit directly outside his office. I refuse, I told HR. That's fine, Nestor said without even looking up. His voice was icy. Submit your resignation letter to HR. I laughed bitterly. You're firing me just because I don't want to change seats? He paused, finally deigning to look up and meet my eyes. I'm only giving you options, he said flatly. Or did you think I wanted something from you? I was speechless. His words leaving me stung. Regina's fierce haggling with the landlord over rent flashed through my mind, and I forced a smile. Phoo, you're so magnanimous. What could I possibly fear? Nestor nodded slightly. Thank you. Close the door on your way out, and turn your chair so it faces away from me. I don't want to see your face. For the next few days, we had little interaction. A week later, the company held a team-building event. As a newcomer, I was inevitably targeted to drink. Naomi, if you don't drink, we'll dock your pay. Don't worry, even if you're drunk, we'll take care of you. It's all women here. What are you afraid of? The manager coaxed and cheered me on while the others laughed and egged me on. I downed the final drink of the night and slumped unconscious onto the table. The next morning, I woke up in a large bed. The sunlight streamed in brightly through the windows, too dazzling to keep my eyes open. I sat up slowly, the blanket slipping to reveal the soft bathrobe wrapped around me. Stunned, I got out of bed and walked toward the open living room. There, Nestor sat, casually reading the morning paper with his legs crossed. He was also wearing a hotel bathrobe. Noticing me, he lifted his gaze slightly. You're awake. Breakfast is on the table. Eat, then go back to sleep if you need to. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My face turned ashen. Did we? Nestor tossed the newspaper onto the coffee table and adjusted the collar of his robe, revealing faint marks on his skin. Unfortunately, he said with a mocking smile, you were the one who took the initiative last night. My mind went blank. Last night was a void in my memory. That's impossible, I stammered. Nestor set a contract on the table in front of me. My fingerprint marked the page. Its contents were horrifyingly clear. I was to be his mistress, and he would pay me $10,000 a month. This isn't my signature, I said, panicked. Oh, Nestor chuckled. Are you sure about that? Under his steady, dispassionate gaze, I opened my mouth to argue but found no words. Without a hint of emotion, he retrieved a recorder from his pocket. I happened to record your monologue last night. Care to listen to your shameless thoughts, Naomi? A wave of humiliation washed over me, my entire body trembling as if submerged in ice. The shame I had buried deep inside, which I had tried to forget, was now dragged into the open and used as evidence against me. Nestor's dark eyes bore down on me, his tone eerily calm. Lusting after a married man? TSK. Naomi, what do you think people will say when they hear this recording? My fists clenched tightly, nails digging into my palms. Is this revenge? I asked, my voice hoarse. Yes, he answered plainly, his expression unreadable. You didn't want me to have peace back then. Why should I let you have any now? Two choices. Either you fulfill the contract, or I make this recording public. The ticking of the clock on the wall echoed in the silence, amplifying the sound of my own frantic heartbeat. My lips were dry and cracked as I forced myself to look up at him. Then make it public, I said, numb, under his icy gaze. I continued dully, Nestor, I won't be a homewrecker. Nestor studied me, his lips curling into a faint, scornful smile. Naomi, who do you think you are? Do you really think you still have the right to choose? Chapter 4. In the bathroom, I found my clothes thrown haphazardly on the floor, while Nestor's were neatly hung on the door's coat rack. The stark contrast stung my eyes. I sighed, silently changed, and left the hotel. Regina called, her voice tense. Naomi, they're asking for $500,000. The sky was a dull gray, with no sign of the sun. Regina had barely saved anything after paying for my treatment, and my own savings were pitiful. They said if we don't pay, they'll expose your secrets, and they won't tell you where your mother's belongings or ashes are. I'll try to get an advance on my salary and borrow some from others. I should be able to scrape it together by next month. Okay. After a moment of hesitation, I pressed a number on my phone. It rang for a long time before the other side picked up. Miss Bai, what can I do for you? Exhaling a puff of cold air, I spoke. Doctor, I'm sorry to disturb you. Simon seemed busy. After a few moments of background noise, he moved to a quieter spot and asked patiently, What's wrong? Taking a deep breath, I finally said, Can you lend me $400,000? It was my first time asking someone for money, and my whole body felt like it was on fire after the words left my mouth. A sudden burst of noise came from his side. Dr. Simon, emergency surgery. Got it. I hadn't held out much hope and was prepared for him to hang up. But just before the call ended, Simon said briefly, Send me your account number. I'll transfer it to you by today. Then the call disconnected. The sky remained gray and oppressive, but the cold, monotonous tone of the busy signal carried an unexpected warmth. That evening, my manager tapped on my desk. We're having dinner with a client tonight. You're coming with me. Just a few hours earlier, I had asked him for an advance on my salary. With the borrowed money and what I'd saved, I finally managed to scrape together the $500,000. When I entered the private room, I saw Nestor. He stood tall and confident, effortlessly charming everyone with small talk. The crystal chandelier cast a soft glow, accentuating his sharp, handsome profile. My manager gave me a gentle nudge forward. Suddenly, all eyes turned to me. Mr. Fu, is she one of yours? Nestor glanced over casually and smiled. Yes, she's new. A new hire personally introduced by Mr. Fu? Quite the looker, someone commented with a teasing tone. Amidst the chatter, everyone took their seats. The manager placed me next to Nestor and whispered, Be smart tonight. Help with the drinking when necessary. Someone asked with a grin. Mr. Fu, can your new employee handle her liquor? Before Nestor could answer, the manager quickly interjected. She can. She's fine. He pushed a glass of wine toward me. Start with a toast. Nestor remained silent, lightly tapping his fingers on the table as he watched. I picked up the glass, held my breath, and downed it in one go. The fiery liquid burned its way down my throat, igniting a trail of heat that roiled in my stomach. The others cheered, ready to push for more, but Nestor's voice cut in smoothly, redirecting the conversation. What were we discussing earlier? Let's continue. The lively atmosphere resumed, and many turned their attention to Nestor, eager to toast him. He declined every time, citing a sensitive stomach, and the drinks were instead funneled toward me by the manager. By the end of the night, I couldn't take it anymore and excused myself to the restroom. The sink's faucet was already running as I leaned over it, dry heaving. My hair, now loose, fell into the sink, soaking through. After sending a quick text to Regina, I slumped against the counter, resting my head as I gasped for air. The sound of deliberate footsteps echoed from outside. The door creaked open. I assumed it was another woman coming to use the restroom. But then Nestor's voice broke the silence. Already reached your limit? His tone was calm, almost mocking, summoning my remaining strength. I forced myself to stand and staggered toward the door, trying to pass him, but he grabbed my arm and pulled me back. His large hand pressed against the back of my neck. radiating heat that contrasted sharply with the chill in the air. "Let me go," I rasped, each word scraping painfully against my raw throat. Nestor easily dragged me back to the mirror, forcing me to face my reflection. His hand tilted my chin upward as he sneered. "Take a good look at yourself. Do you really want to walk out there looking like this? Or are you hoping to catch the attention of someone even more dangerous?" In the mirror, my damp eyes glistened, my cheeks flushed red, my hair hung in messy strands around my ears, and my neckline was slightly disheveled. Nestor's dark, piercing gaze roamed over me through the reflection, unabashedly taking in every detail of my disheveled appearance. I squeezed my eyes shut, trembling as I whispered, "Who could be more dangerous than you?" A low chuckle escaped him as he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Come home with me tonight. What do you say?" "Get lost," I spat weakly. He silenced me with a kiss, stealing the air from my lungs with unrelenting force. The alcohol in my veins turned my blood into molten lava, coursing through me with reckless abandon. The light blurred, and water droplets clung to my lashes as if I were separated from reality by a thin veil. Each moment burned like acid on my heart, leaving raw, unrelenting pain in its wake. Sweat soaked my skin as I weakly pounded my fists against him, but it felt like I was being dragged back to the darkest days of my life. Staring hopelessly at this vibrant, chaotic world, I felt completely out of place. "Nestor, can't you just let me go?" I was falling silently, crashing into the abyss. It must have hurt, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. "Naomi!" Nestor's voice called out to me, but it wasn't filled with the hatred I had come to expect. For the first time, he seemed panicked. In my haze, I couldn't tell if the man in front of me was the Nestor I had known in the past or the one standing before me now. "Nestor," I said, my voice faint, "I never want to see you again." Chapter 5. The fever came on with a vengeance. My mind was muddled, and every inch of my body ached unbearably. I curled up under the blankets, shivering uncontrollably. Outside, the northern wind howled. In the haze of my delirium, I dreamt of the past. I was lying on Nestor's back, asking him, "Nestor, what would you do if I died?" Carrying me steadily forward, he coaxed softly, "Don't talk nonsense. It's just a fever. You'll be fine after the injection. Hey, do you have enough money for your living expenses? Injections are expensive." "It's fine," he said. "How can it be fine? How many jobs are you working?" Nestor didn't answer. Instead, he set me down at the nurse's station and crouched before me, looking me in the eye. "As long as you're safe and sound, nothing else matters," he said, bundled up in a thick down jacket. I hesitated. "When my mom and dad stop fighting, I'll ask them for my allowance and pay you back." Nestor patted my hair gently, his gaze soft. "Believe me, someday we'll have plenty of money." But I didn't stay safe and sound like he hoped. The night Nestor went to another province for a competition, I returned home and opened the door to my parents' bedroom. Inside, my father was holding another woman in his arms. That was the moment my once perfect life began to unravel. What followed was a series of explosive arguments between my parents, my father's abrupt departure, and mounting debts for the Bai family. One night, a group of middle-aged debt collectors came knocking. The flickering overhead light, their rowdy jeers, the dull pain on my skin, the nauseating sensation of their touch, and my mother's heart-wrenching screams all merged into a chaotic whirlwind in my mind. Everything blurred, like a movie set to fast forward. My mother was driven to her death by the debt collectors, found lifeless in the bathtub. Regina discovered me, barely clothed, and took me far away to the southern city. On a rainy day, I sat curled up in a corner of the hospital, wearing mourning clothes, looking disheveled and defeated. "She has a genetic predisposition to depression," the doctor said. "Does she have any family left?" Regina looked at me worriedly. "She has a boyfriend. He's out of town for a competition. Notify him," the doctor replied. His voice carried clinical detachment, mixing medical jargon with grave advice. "She shows clear signs of suicidal tendencies. Treatment will be challenging and long-term. Her family needs to prepare for a drawn-out battle." At that point, my mental state couldn't support going to the police or gathering evidence to seek justice. Regina and I were like stray dogs, fleeing the home we had known all our lives, battered and defeated. That same day, Nestor's name appeared first on the list of winners for the competition. He called me. When I answered, all I could hear was the sound of wind rushing past him. Naomi. His voice was as gentle as ever. I didn't let you down. 3 years from now, I'll marry you. I looked at the slowly closing iron gate, unable to see a way back home. Nestor, I don't think I can be with you anymore, I said, holding back sobs as tears silently streamed down my face. He held his breath. Why? I opened my mouth, hesitating in that moment. His future was so bright. Could I selfishly drag him into the endless rainy days of the southern city, trapping him with me for the rest of his life? Beyond the window, a young girl sobbed uncontrollably behind a fence, while a boy's face showed a heartbreaking mix of apathy and disdain. I had seen the moment love disappeared from someone's eyes. It was soul-crushing. The wind blew through my hair, revealing bruises and marks on my neck. Wiping my tears, I whispered, Nestor, take care of yourself. Let's just end it. Chapter 6. The faint beeping of a medical monitor echoed in my ears. Golden rays of the setting sun filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow on the sofa nearby, like a delicate layer of shimmering gold. I blinked slowly, the lingering shadows of my nightmare retreating as I sat up in bed. A man was seated on the sofa, quietly peeling an apple with practiced ease. His slender, pale fingers moved skillfully, and before long, a perfectly peeled apple lay in his hand, smooth and untouched. It was Nestor. Hearing the rustle of movement, he looked up, his dark eyes locking with mine. Without a word, he stood and pressed the call button for the nurse. A doctor entered shortly, examining my pupils and confirming there was no immediate issue. He turned to Nestor. She's malnourished. Focus on increasing her protein intake in her meals. Nestor nodded. Thank you. As the door clicked shut behind the doctor, Nestor approached the bed, holding out the apple. Don't think about anything else right now. Focus on getting better. I didn't take the apple. Instead, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, got up, and began rummaging through the room. My phone was gone. There were no clothes other than the hospital gown I was wearing. Nestor remained silent, watching me turn the hospital room upside down. Nestor, what are you trying to do? I stood barefoot on the cold floor, sunlight streaming in to highlight my pale, frail reflection on the glass. What am I trying to do? Nestor repeated, his voice calm. Don't you know? Placing the apple on the bedside table, he pulled out a tissue and meticulously wiped his hands. I want you. He sat there in the sunlight, his gaze unguarded and intent, his dark eyes burning with an intensity that was both humiliating and unbearable. I trembled, my fists clenching at my sides. Nestor, you can't do this to me. He rose and crossed the room in a few strides, towering over me. With a strange tenderness, he reached out and smoothed my hair. Why can't I? I have someone I love, I said, my voice shaking. Please, leave me alone. Oh, really? His expression turned cold, devoid of the slightest hint of amusement. He cupped my face in his hands, leaning in close. His lips hovered just a breath away from mine, stopping a mere inch apart. I couldn't break free. As I turned my head away, I shut my eyes tightly, my body involuntarily shivering. Nestor chuckled, his voice low and icy as it poured into my ears. Naomi, you're lying. Chapter 7. The private hospital was nestled in the outskirts, surrounded by endless stretches of forest. I couldn't leave, nor could I contact anyone. I had tried appealing to the doctors and nurses, but they all claimed they couldn't help me. Nestor came by every day, usually in the evenings. He would arrive looking worn from the day, sit with me, and talk for a while. I resisted his displays of affection, and Nestor never forced them. Recently, I kept dreaming about the past. Back then, I never stopped saying his name. I'd tell him, Nestor, you're destined to be rich and successful one day. He would sigh quietly and ask, what flavor of milk do you want today? Banana. I'd reply, to get me banana milk. The top student, Nestor, skipped class for the first time and got caught by the teacher. Later, in college, rumors began circulating about him and the campus belle. I took the subway for over 10 stops and sat outside the boys' dormitory, crying. Late at night, Nestor threw on some clothes and rushed downstairs. Gently, he wiped away my tears. Stop crying. If you want me, I'm yours. From now on, and only you. Confessions don't work like that, I murmured. He froze, then pulled me into a tight embrace. I love you. Back then, neither of us could have predicted that. Over a decade later, we'd end up like this. Tomorrow, I'm getting married. The sun outside had yet to set, its warmth lingering in the air. Nestor's voice pulled me back from my distant thoughts. Is there anything you want to say to me? I held the half-empty glass of milk in my hands, staring blankly at his face. In that moment, I finally understood why I'd been dreaming so often lately. I was saying goodbye to the Naomi and Nestor of the past. The television had been playing endless news about him and Calliope, the golden couple, a match made in heaven. It was the future we had once envisioned for ourselves. But now, the Naomi of today, buried in debt and broken, had no right to dream of such a thing. Congratulations, I said softly. May you have many children. Nestor's hand, which had been peeling an apple, paused. The blade grazed his fingertip, and blood seeped out almost instantly. He froze, then grabbed a tissue to press against the wound. He let out a low chuckle, his head bowed. It doesn't matter. She and I are just putting on a show. If you want children, I don't mind. Nestor, can't we just let this go? I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion. Let's part on good terms. Nestor stopped peeling the apple, tossing it back into the fruit basket. His gaze bore into me, and a faint, mocking smile tugged at his lips. Just let it go? And why should I? You started this. Then, in the end, you casually walked away, as if it all meant nothing. What does that make me? A dog? I closed my eyes briefly, blocking out the sunlight filtering through the window. Then I'll give it all back to you. Nestor stiffened. What are you saying? I stared at the sun sinking toward the horizon. You don't want me to have peace. Fine. I'll die for you. Suddenly, his hand shot out, gripping my chin tightly and forcing me to look at him. His eyes burned with fury. Naomi, are you insane? If you wanted to die so badly, why didn't you do it back then? Chapter 8. I couldn't remember when Nestor left. That night, his brother, Phineas, once a friend of mine, burst into the room, slamming the door open. Naomi, do you remember what you promised me? His sharp questioning left me bewildered. Do you know how much Nestor stands to lose by breaking off the engagement? You're an adult now. Can't you stop being as selfish and reckless as you were back then? Must Nestor always clean up your mess? Can't you think about him for once? What's going on? What's going on? Phineas let out a humorless laugh, his voice rising into a furious roar. Nestor's breaking off the engagement because of you, and you're asking me what's going on? My ears buzzed, his words crashing into me like waves. I sat there, stunned and blank. If he broke off the engagement, what would that make me? A homewrecker? Phineas yanked me out of bed, his grip harsh. You're coming with me. You're good at making excuses, aren't you? Say one of your old lines. I'm tired of this. I've found someone new. Any of those will do. Phineas. Naomi! His voice shook with anger, his entire body trembling. If you hadn't come back, none of this would have happened. His rage reverberated in the howling wind outside, freezing every nerve in my body. The buzzing in my ears drowned out everything else. The hatred in his eyes was so intense, as if he believed I deserved to die. Phineas. It's not me, it's him who won't let me go. His face hardened, his expression turning cold. We'll deal with this first. Then I'll send you away. The office building was brightly lit. Even in the dead of night, Phineas dragged me inside. But it was already too late. The press conference had started. Nestor sat confidently under the glaring spotlights. We've heard rumors that your broken engagement was caused by a third party, a reporter asked. Calm and composed, Nestor replied. Calliope and I had our differences and decided to part ways amicably. Phineas's face darkened, and his hand clamped down on my wrist, keeping me from moving. But according to sources, you've rekindled your romance with your first love. Nestor remained steady, his tone unruffled. Those are just baseless rumors. If there are no further questions, this concludes today's press conference. As he stood up to leave, someone shouted, "She's here! That's her!" Every camera in the room instantly turned toward us. I was exposed under the glaring lights. Disoriented and overwhelmed, reporters surged forward, closing in on all sides. In seconds, the room became an impenetrable wall of people. "Miss, what's your relationship with Nestor? Did you interfere in his engagement?" The endless barrage of questions drowned out my weak denials. "No. I didn't. I'm not." Breaking news! A reporter suddenly shouted, holding up a phone playing an audio clip. My voice rang out, trembling with drunken tears. "Nestor, I love you." It was from a recording. Panic gripped me as realization set in. I had thought my life couldn't possibly get worse. But as the storm fully unleashed itself, I was utterly destroyed. "She's the mistress. Shameless." The whispers felt like slaps across my face. Blood drained from my cheeks, and the recording pinned me firmly to the pillar of disgrace. "I'm sorry. Nestor, get her out of here," Phineas shouted, his voice full of fury. Nestor pushed through the crowd, his expression uncharacteristically frantic for the first time. Everything around me blurred. Then came another voice, reading aloud from an anonymous tip. Her father was a debtor. Her mother committed suicide. She has severe hereditary depression and spent 5 years in a psychiatric hospital in the southern city. The crowd erupted in gasps. "She's mentally ill? What's she doing here ruining people's lives? Crazy! Why isn't she dead yet?" Nestor froze in his tracks, his eyes snapping toward me. Shock, confusion, disbelief. I sat amidst the chaos, my body growing colder and colder, until even my blood felt frozen. Naomi, Nestor's voice trembled as he called my name. I knew what would come next. I waited quietly for the guillotine to fall, severing what little remained of my ruined life. She was assaulted, too. The final blow from the anonymous tip landed. Nestor's face turned deathly pale, like a sheet of paper. Chapter 9, Nestor's Perspective. Since that day, after returning from the company, Nestor hadn't spoken a single word. The blinds remained shut for 3 days, keeping the room steeped in darkness. His phone was cluttered with missed calls, filling the screen. He hadn't opened a single one. Time seemed to have stopped for him, pressing pause on his entire existence. Nestor sat slumped in his chair, head bowed, lifeless. He could still hear that man's voice from the day he had taken Naomi away, cold and biting. "We've all been trying to help her live. Mr. Fu, with your iron hand, you've effortlessly undone everything we worked so hard for." And Regina, who had been stopped by the security guards, screaming at him from outside the office, her voice hoarse with rage. "Nestor, don't you know what happens when she skips her meds? Keeping her locked up is no different from killing her." Depression, psychiatric hospital. Those words twisted like sharp needles, burrowing into his mind, tormenting him relentlessly. Phineas knocked on the door before opening it just enough to step inside. Standing at the threshold, he asked, "Are you doing any better?" "Why?" Nestor's voice was hoarse, weighted by a dull pain in his chest that felt like it was splitting him apart. Phineas hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm sorry. I thought there wasn't a need to look deeper." "So, the files were fake, weren't they?" Nestor's voice was barely audible. "Phineas, while you told me she'd been abroad, moving from one boyfriend to another, Naomi was locked up in a psychiatric hospital in the southern city. I didn't know." Phineas's apology was weak, its frailty piercing. Nestor didn't blame him entirely. He couldn't. Perhaps if he'd asked more questions, things wouldn't have turned out this way. But he didn't have the strength to listen to Phineas's excuses anymore. Regina barged in, ignoring the secretary's attempts to stop her. The sudden flood of light made Nestor squint. Though he didn't tell her to leave, the secretary apologized repeatedly. "Sorry, Mr. Fu, I couldn't stop her." "Leave us," Nestor said. The secretary carefully shut the door, returning the room to its dim state. Regina stood stiffly, as if unwilling to be associated with him in any way. "Mr. Fu," she began, her voice cold, "there's something I need to say." The window was open a crack, letting in a biting chill. Nestor remained motionless, listening in silence. People who do wrong must eventually face the consequences, sooner or later. Last year, on Naomi's birthday, I joked and asked her who she loved most in the world. She said, first was her mom, and second was Nestor. Nestor shut his eyes. That single sentence cutting through him, chilling him to the bone. At the time, she was doing well. All she needed was a small dose of medication each day, and she could live like anyone else. That's why, this year, I brought her back to help sort through her mom's belongings. Regina's eyes reddened as she continued. She always said the breakup back then was too messy. This time, she just wanted to see you again, properly, even just from afar. Watching her big shot entrepreneur, that would have been enough for her because she knew she wasn't worthy of you anymore. Nestor, is she really not worthy of you? Do you know how you got your spot in that competition? Nestor's fists clenched as the truth began to surface, each revelation more devastating than the last. It was supposed to go to someone else. Naomi wrote an anonymous complaint demanding fairness and transparency. That's the only reason you got it. But in doing so, she offended a lot of people. When her father ran away later, she and her mother faced constant harassment. The weight of that revelation tightened around Nestor's throat, making it hard to breathe. She had been bullied. Because of him? Regina pressed on. When you were away for the competition, you didn't call home for a week, so you probably didn't know what happened here. The Bai family collapsed. Her father ran off with his mistress, leaving behind mountains of debt. Debt collectors came knocking every day, threatening Naomi and her mother's lives. Her mother couldn't take it anymore and ended her own life, leaving Naomi behind to face everything. She was tormented until she fell ill. Regina's gaze bored into Nestor. The worst of it? I couldn't take my eyes off her for even a second. She was a shell of a person, barely holding on. When you got into that car accident, Naomi begged me to let her die. How could she have gone to see you? Nestor's face turned ashen, and he shut his eyes, unable to bear the flood of memories from the past months that clawed at him like demons. He had allowed the manager to get her drunk and send her to his room. He had coaxed her into revealing her vulnerability while forging a fake, worthless contract, just to watch her struggle in pain. He had humiliated and tormented her time and time again. He had confined her in a private hospital on the outskirts of the city. When Regina came to plead for her, he hadn't even agreed to see her. He had asked her if she was crazy, and why she hadn't just died back then. Naomi's eyes had grown emptier day by day, yet she would still silently look at him, unmoving. At the time, he thought it was love that kept her staring, but now he realized she had been silently questioning him. How could you treat me so cruelly? Why didn't anyone tell me? Nestor's voice cracked. Regina broke into tears. How would we have explained it to you? She was sick. Just staying alive was a luxury. The only thing she could do was make sure the people she cared about wouldn't be dragged down with her. She cared more about your education than anything else. That competition was your shot at success, one she fought tooth and nail to give you. She just wanted you to live well. Nestor, did she deserve to die? Did she deserve to die? The question landed like a sledgehammer, smashing into Nestor's chest. It was he who had clung to her, tormented her, and taken pleasure in her suffering. It was he who had humiliated her, using a fake contract to tarnish her dignity. It was he who deserved to suffer. We tried everything to give Naomi a reason to live, Regina said with a bitter laugh. In the end, we found only one thing that worked. Nestor froze, dreading her next words. Regina gave a sad, mocking smile. Your name. She never forgot her big shot entrepreneur. Chapter 10. When I left this place years ago, I joked with Regina, saying I'd never come back here. As it turns out, flags like that shouldn't be raised lightly. I got sick again. In the southern city, only the winters are somewhat dry. Most years it's freezing rain. But this year, for the first time in ages, it actually snowed. The nurses and doctors chatted idly. It's a cold winter this year. The planet's climate is becoming less and less hospitable for humans. The new year was approaching, and the trees outside stood bare. Not a single leaf left. I pressed my face against the cold window pane, exhaling to form a layer of fog. There's someone downstairs. He's standing there every day. Doesn't he feel the cold? Regina walked by with a cup of warm milk, her expression blank. Oh, is that so? Maybe he doesn't. She hadn't been in a good mood lately. Even Dr. Simon seemed on edge. As a result, I'd been treading carefully every day, afraid to accidentally provoke either of them. Regina stopped suddenly, realizing she might have startled me. She softened her tone. Drink your milk, and take your meds in an hour. Dr. Simon said he's taking you to build a snowman tonight. I glanced at the person outside again, finding him oddly familiar. Regina pulled the curtains shut. Stop looking, you'll hurt your eyes. Oh. I returned to bed, took my medication, and leaned against a pillow to play games. Outside, I could hear Regina and Dr. Simon talking. A moment later, he came into the room. I quickly hid my phone and sat up straight. I've already taken my meds. The sharp smell of disinfectant filled the air. Simon's eyes scanned me briefly before resting on my face. Miss Bai, I won't scold you for playing games. I flushed red and slowly pulled out my phone. How did you know I was playing? I play too. I recognized the background music. Simon washed his hands, removed his white coat, and caught my reflection in the mirror. With a slight smile, he asked, "Aren't you going to get dressed? We're building that snowman, remember?" He worked in thoracic surgery at the same hospital. The first time I saw him, it was an autumn day. The weather was unusually clear, and I was crouching near the fence, trying to pick up a ball of yarn that had somehow ended up outside. Simon walked by and stopped, looking down at me. I was out of breath from bending over. "Excuse me, could you help me pick that up?" He glanced at the sign on the fence and said, "According to the rules, you're not supposed to touch anything potentially dangerous." When I didn't move, he asked again, "What are you trying to do?" "Cat's cradle." Simon checked the time and crouched down. "All right, I'll play with you for a bit, but I'm taking the string when we're done." His lunch break was short, so I quietly stretched my hands through the fence to play with him. Before he left, I said, "Thank you." We ran into each other a few more times after that. He was usually busy and didn't stop to talk. One day, he came back and pulled out a string. "Sorry, I've been too busy lately." After that, he started talking to me more often. "You don't say much, do you?" I try not to. "Why?" "I'm sick. I don't think I have anything cheerful to say, and I don't want to dump emotional garbage on others." Simon had stared at me silently for a while after I said that. Then he started visiting more frequently. Sometimes he looked exhausted. I tried to learn a few jokes to tell him. Each time, Simon would listen with gentle eyes, as if humoring me. One day, he asked, "Naomi, what's your wish?" "To make everyone happy, including myself." Chapter 11. I quickly bundled up in my gear and waited for Simon to put on his down jacket. He held my hand as we headed downstairs. Every few steps, there was a security checkpoint. Only he could take me out. Snow fell heavily under the night sky, blanketing everything in white. My hat soon turned snowy as well. Simon handed me a small shovel. "Don't overdo it." "Got it." The crisp cold air inexplicably lifted my spirits. I carried the shovel and wandered around the frozen fountain. As I turned, I suddenly spotted Nestor standing not far away. His bloodshot eyes and unkempt stubble made him look exhausted, but his gaze was fixed on me. "Nestor?" My voice was soft, tinged with surprise. Nestor's lips moved. "Naomi, I was wrong." If it had been in the past, I might have arrogantly asked, "What exactly were you wrong about?" Now, I simply gripped the shovel, lowering my head in awkward silence. "It's fine. I'd been through too much, and my sharp edges had long since been worn away." The wind and snow howled in the dark night. Nestor slowly walked toward me, kneeling down as his voice cracked. "How can it be fine? Naomi, please, say something to me. Anything." I thought for a moment and said earnestly, "I wish us good health in the coming year." At that moment, all the color drained from Nestor's face. Tears streamed down his cheeks, his voice trembling. "Don't treat me like this, please." I reached out to touch his face. It was cold, icy to the touch, just like in the past. I cradled his face carefully and said with quiet sincerity, "I wanted to find a dignified way to see you one more time, but I made a mess of things." I'm sorry, Nestor said. His voice choked. If only I had. It was my choice to leave your life. I interrupted gently. No one else is to blame. My words came slowly, tinged with sadness. At the class reunion, I only went because the class monitor told me you wouldn't be there. I just wanted to hear about you, to see if you were doing well. Nestor sobbed uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Naomi. I planned it on purpose. Is that so? I forced a faint smile, unsure how to feel. Naomi, I'm sorry. I wasn't there for you when you needed me most. He held my hands, and his gaze fell on the scars on my wrists. There's no need to apologize. I didn't want to hold on to you and drag you into a life of misery, only to argue years later over who owed who. I patiently brushed the snowflakes off his eyelashes. Nestor, seeing you so successful makes me truly happy, but I promised to make money for you, to take care of you. His hands trembled as he held mine. Without you, what's the point of it all? I blinked, my nose red from the cold. See? My scarf costs over $100. I've got enough money. The light in Nestor's eyes dimmed completely. His voice quivered as he asked, There's no going back, is there? Nestor, you have your life, and I need to walk my own path. I'm not going back to the northern city. Hurtful words aren't easily forgotten. We all have memories. I've been pinned to a pillar of shame. If I returned, every step forward would feel like walking on the edge of a blade. That would hurt 1,000 times more than letting go of a relationship. Nestor took a deep breath, gently clasping my hands, warming them like he used to. I'm sorry about the recording. I coaxed you into saying it. That night, I didn't touch you. My eyes burned with unshed tears. Then apologize to me properly. Nestor, just say sorry. Pain flashed across his face as he memorized every detail of mine, engraving it in his memory for one final goodbye. I'm sorry. I patted his shoulder gently but couldn't bring myself to say, It's okay, Nestor. I wish you peace and happiness for the rest of your life. The snow fell heavier. I turned away, walking forward with all my strength as the wind pushed me off balance. Behind me, the storm's howl grew distant. I couldn't tell if it was the wind or Nestor's sobs. Simon stood under the dim yellow glow of a street lamp, his tan coat buttoned tightly, hands tucked in his pockets. His sharp features and focused gaze were faintly visible through the snow. I approached him, as if nothing had happened. He asked, What did you see? I brushed the snow off my hat and looked up, my eyes slightly red. Dr. Simon. Thank you. Chapter 12. A few days later, I saw Nestor in the entertainment news. He looked much thinner. During an interview, he confessed everything he had done to me, recounting it in painstaking detail to the media. He admitted to coercing me, and he confirmed that the recording was something he had manipulated me into saying. He also shared a copy of a contract. It bore the signatures of both him and Calliope. The document revealed a 2-year engagement agreement, an arrangement meant to end amicably and benefit both parties. It turned out they had never intended to marry. That night, the press conference had originally been scheduled to announce the end of their engagement. This revelation dealt a devastating blow to Nestor's company. His years of hard-earned reputation and status crumbled almost overnight. In the aftermath, Phineas called me once. I owe you an explanation, Naomi, he said. He admitted to being blind to people's true nature. Calliope had harbored personal motives and leaked my private matters. The debt collectors who once extorted me for $500,000 had sold my information to Calliope for double the price after losing contact when Nestor took me to the private hospital. Phineas also expressed his worries about Nestor's deteriorating work condition. He asked if I would consider going back. I gave him the same answer. I had said everything there was to say. What remained was beyond my control. 3 months later, my condition stabilized, and I was ready to be discharged. Warm sunlight streamed through the window, and outside, spring was in full bloom. The familiar scent of disinfectant drifted into the room. I knew Simon had arrived. Got any food? I've been busy all day. Spare me a bite. He had been so busy lately that he frequently came to scavenge for snacks in my room. I unwrapped my wool scarf to reveal a warm red bean bun hidden inside. Simon didn't hesitate to take it. Tearing open the package, he dug in with gusto. I watched him until he noticed and laughed. Why are you staring at me like that? You're easy to please. Simon finished the bun and asked, have you thought about settling down here? Why do you ask? Well, I have an apartment for rent. I paused for a moment. Are you short on money or something? His sincerity was hard to miss. I don't have much income right now, so I probably can't afford expensive rent. I'm very affordable, Simon said with a straight face. No neighbors. I'm scared living alone. I blinked, unsure if he was being serious or setting me up. On the day of my discharge, a gentle spring breeze lifted my spirits. For the first time in a long while, I smiled. While crossing the street, I forgot to check the traffic light and was abruptly yanked back by the collar. I stumbled into Simon's arms. He held my hand and didn't let go. You, he replied casually, his voice light, his lips curving upward slightly. I'm courting you. His tone was so natural, as if he were commenting on the weather. Thump thump, a child in the distance beat a toy drum, giggling and playing. Thump thump. It was the sound of my heart pounding. My voice trembled, but I still mustered the courage to look up at Simon. I've loved someone for a very, very long time. I'm not sure. The breeze ruffled Simon's hair, and his gaze was tender. Miss Bai, I've loved someone for a very, very long time too. Give me a chance. At that moment, my eyes grew moist. I'm not in great shape. I've been sick. My body. Miss Bai, Simon interrupted softly. You once said your wish was for everyone to be happy, including yourself. He blinked with a playful glint. I hope your wish comes true. A light breeze stirred. Sunlight filtered through the branches, casting its warmth on his face. The spring I once thought unattainable had quietly arrived, spreading blossoms everywhere, painting the world with its brilliance. Chapter 13, Nestor's Perspective. The following winter, Calliope's company declared bankruptcy. The people who once tormented Naomi were all brought to justice by Nestor. After enduring several crises, Nestor's company finally began to recover. That day, Nestor sat alone in his office for a long time. Outside, snow fell heavily, and the headlights from the cars below stretched into endless streaks of light. He had been working non-stop for half a month, yet it felt as though he were living in another world. Suddenly, he remembered that it had also snowed on the same day a year ago. That was the day Naomi appeared at the class reunion. He could still see the moment she spotted him arriving with Calliope, her eyes wide with shock and panic. Since then, he had replayed that scene countless times in his dreams. And in those dreams, he always rewrote the ending. In his dreams, he had ended the engagement early, reported the manager when he tried to drug her drink, and had never forced her to drink or spoken harshly to her. Instead, he had given her the dignified reunion she had hoped for. In those dreams, Naomi came back to him, curled up in his arms late at night, recounting the hardships she had endured while crying her heart out. He had held her close, kissed her tears away, comforted her, and asked her to marry him. In his dreams, they built a home together. He could see their wedding photo, Naomi smiling brightly with her fingers intertwined with his. But each time he woke, he found himself lying alone in his cold bed, listening to the ticking of the clock. It was then that he would realize time moved forward. But Naomi would never again be part of his future. She was gone, completely and irrevocably. That snowy night in the southern city, Naomi had wished him peace and happiness for the rest of his life. Her eyes sincere and calm, she had said she wouldn't return. She had mourned the lack of a proper reunion. Her eyes had been red when she spoke, a reflection of the hurt he had caused her. And so she had chosen to leave, not out of anger or blame, but with that gentle farewell that cut deeper than any rebuke. Her parting words, though soft, felt like a knife in his heart, a wound that would never heal. Years of irregular work and sleepless nights had left Nestor with chronic stomach issues. When it flared, the pain was excruciating. One night, he woke from another dream, lying in his cold bed as the moon hung in the sky outside. He remembered Naomi watching the moon with him. It felt like a lifetime ago. A sudden longing for her overwhelmed him, and by the next day, he had booked a flight to the southern city. It had been a year since he last set foot there, and the weather was still the same, bitter winds and heavy snow. Pedestrians hurried past, heads down against the cold. Following the address he had obtained, Nestor found a small apartment building. It was nearing evening, but the windows on the second floor were still dark. He stood in a quiet corner and waited. Half an hour later, he heard Naomi's voice. It was soft yet earnest. That tomato and beef stew wasn't very good. Next time, buy some beef, and I'll cook it. Regina likes it too. Invite her over. Instinctively, Nestor looked up. The familiar figure immediately caught his eye. She was wearing a little white hat, or maybe it was pink or gray. It was hard to tell, as the snow had already covered it completely. Her figure had filled out slightly, and she walked steadily on the snowy ground, no longer swaying with each step. Beside her was a tall man with glasses, his gaze warm and attentive as it followed her. The man's eyes flicked up and locked onto Nestor's. He stopped in his tracks. The two men stood silently, separated by the snow and wind. "Simon, did you hear me?" Naomi's voice broke the silence. Her tone was still the same, gentle, familiar, but now it was meant for someone else. Simon withdrew his gaze and replied, "I heard you. You want to make tomato beef stew. But last time you burned the pot. I still haven't replaced it." Naomi lowered her head, visibly deflated. "Oh, sorry." Simon reached out to pat the top of her hat, the gesture soft and affectionate, as if soothing a cuddly polar bear. "Go on home. Don't forget the cat hasn't been fed." "Where are you going?" "To buy a pot." "What about the beef?" "I'll get that too." "In such a hurry?" "Yes. We're eating it tonight." Naomi ran off toward the building's entrance, her figure disappearing into the stairwell. Simon turned back to Nestor. Nestor hesitated, then spoke first. "Congratulations." Simon smiled lightly. "Thank you." Nestor had misunderstood. The son Simon mentioned was their cat, but Simon had no intention of correcting him. Last year, when he took Naomi out to build a snowman, he had given Nestor the chance to fix things. Whatever the circumstances, Naomi and Nestor were over now. It was time to move on and live their separate lives. "How is her condition?" Nestor finally asked. "Stable," Simon replied bluntly. "She has a good temperament. Doesn't get upset easily. She's a wonderful person." Nestor already knew she was doing well, because he knew exactly what Naomi looked like when she was truly happy. Through his glasses, Simon's gaze turned sharp. "Mr. Fu, how long have you known her?" 14 years. Nestor answered quietly. Chapter 14, Nestor's perspective. "You know her better than I do. Her birthday is coming up. I want to get her a gift." "Snacks. Puff snacks are best. She doesn't like chocolate." Nestor answered without hesitation. Simon nodded politely, his tone professional. "Thank you. 14 years. You know her better than I do." Those words carried a subtle dissatisfaction, a quiet accusation from Simon. If Nestor knew her so well, why had he hated her so deeply? Why had he let her suffer so much in the years that followed? "Nestor?" A clear voice pierced through the falling snow. Nestor turned sharply, startled. The face he had dreamed of countless times appeared suddenly in his line of sight. Even the curve of her smile was exactly as he remembered it. Naomi stood under an umbrella, clutching another in her arms. Her eyes widened in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Nestor's heart twisted as he saw the clarity and calmness in her eyes. She had let go. After a moment of silence, he said, "I was passing through for business, ran into Mr. Simon and stopped to chat." "Passing through the neighborhood?" Naomi looked slightly puzzled. Simon interjected, "Why are you back outside?" Naomi seemed to recall something and handed him the umbrella. "The snow's getting heavier. I didn't want you catching a cold, so I came down to give you this." As she spoke to Simon, the corners of her mouth lifted, and her gaze softened. The sight was a sharp pain in Nestor's chest. "Would you like to come inside?" Simon asked politely. Nestor smiled faintly. "No, I have a flight tonight. I'm short on time." Naomi pulled her coat tighter around herself, then seemed to remember something. "Wait here for a moment." She turned and ran back into the building. Simon followed her silently, his expression unreadable. Nestor waited outside, the snow growing heavier. The gray sky hung oppressively low, and his stomach began to ache again. Phineas called, "Brother." His voice was hesitant, Your test results came back. It's stomach cancer. Nestor didn't move. He didn't know if he had heard the words or not. His gaze lifted to the swirling snow above him. Got it, he murmured, then hung up. He stood there like nothing had happened, his eyes fixed on the doorway. A warm light spilled out onto the snow, forming a trapezoid. After a while, Naomi came back alone. Simon had bundled her up so thoroughly she looked like a waddling snowball. She carried a small red box in her hands and struggled to walk through the snow before handing it to Nestor. I baked some cookies myself. Take them for the road. Nestor accepted the box, and a memory surfaced of years ago, when Naomi had loved baking. Back then, the cookies were terrible, with a strong eggy smell. Every failed batch had ended up in his stomach. He'd once jokingly declared the kitchen off limits for her in their future home. But now, she could bake something presentable. Naomi spoke sincerely. Thank you for your donation. Nestor knew her organization supported people with mental health struggles and financial difficulties. She donated almost everything she had, keeping only a small amount for herself. You're welcome, he replied simply. Then, unable to resist, he looked at her face. It's cold. You should go back inside. I probably won't come back again. Naomi smiled. That's not true. Someday, we'll invite you to an awards ceremony. Nestor's throat tightened, and he couldn't bring himself to respond. She turned away, her snow boots crunching loudly as she walked. Just before reaching the door, she paused and looked back. Nestor. His head snapped up, his heart suddenly racing. He waited, hoping she would say something. Anything. Naomi smiled warmly at him. Happy New Year. A simple New Year's greeting. Nestor's heart stilled once more. He stood motionless in the freezing wind and replied softly, Happy New Year.